Right, so our latest project is Sky's the Limit. And I thought we'd start off with skies because that seems like the obvious thing. And I think a subject that everybody wants to improve on, including myself. We always want to paint better skies. But to paint good skies, we need to have a good understanding of how the paint flows and works, and when you can work wet into wet and when you can't, and what you can do to increase the working time, increase the depth of your colour, etc. But back to baby steps first. There's my brush, I'm looking for my brush. So what we need to think about first of all is the flow of the paint and creating good washes. Washes that we're not necessarily in control of, but we're not worried that are running away with us. I think even something like a flat wash, if you want to create a flat wash on a piece of paper, it's always easier to get a flat wash on a dry piece of paper. But to get a flat wash on dry paper, you need to have plenty of colour mixed up and plenty of water, because this is going to sink right into your paper as it hasn't been pre-wet first. You can use a round brush or a flat brush, and I'll show you both. So my round brush fully loaded, tip pointing up over to create a flat wash, and pressing down on the belly, dragging the brush across, bringing it down just to the line that I've left there. And ideally what I don't want to do is go backwards and forwards. I want to try and pick up on that line that I've just left and go down underneath. You can probably see there where I've joined up the colour. It's actually left an overlay. So if I go back over somewhere, what I'm doing there really is I'm putting another layer on, but also what I'm doing is this part of the brush is brushing off the paint that I've already put on and leaving a new trail behind. And what happens is you sometimes get the colours fighting with each other and not leaving a nice soft mark. And certainly when you go back over, you will get a line. So it's quite tricky to get that flatness in your wash. So it is worth practicing. And if you're working on a big piece of paper and you want a big flat wash, I definitely recommend a big fat brush. It makes life so much easier. You really can't put a good flat wash on with little brushes. I'm working on fairly small areas here just to show you the different ways. Now this is wet paper, so let me show you the same thing again in wet paper. So in the wet paper, it's hard to see this, I can do exactly the same thing. Carry the paint along. But because the paper is wet, the paint's going to swim around. It's not really going to go on as flat as the dry section. Oops. It's my palette falling off. It's not going to work exactly the same as the dry section. But I can use the wet paper to produce even a graded wash by going back in over the top with some darker colour. You know, if you're painting the sky, you want the sky darker at the top. And that, if I did that quick enough, would melt into the area that I've just painted there. I was a little bit slow on that because my palette fell on the floor. But I can show you again and go in darker again on this to help with my graded wash. Put the colour in there. I might regret using this hot press paper, it's not very thick. I always tell people not to skimp on paper, and I'm doing it myself. But you can see there how the paints are melting into each other, and I'm getting that nice softness going down into the base of the sky. and you can soften off, or you can lift out a little cloud just by pushing the paint back. When you're lifting out your clouds, make sure when you come off, you rinse that paint out before you try and lift out any more. Or you can drop some into the base of your sky to produce smaller little cloud effects. But rinse it off, come back with your clean brush. There we are, and push that cloud out there like that. All important thing is to get all that done while the paint's still wet. And the better quality paper you have, I must say, the easier it is to paint skies. So do choose at least £140 rough as a starting point. If you want a smoother paper, go up a weight. I'm using, say, a hot press pad just to do this demonstration for you. But if I was painting on a sky, a proper sized picture, I wouldn't dream of working on this paper to do a nice watercolour sky. I might want the smooth surface, but I would go up a grade in weight so that I could get the absorbency and the working time that I wanted. So that was the round brush. I can do the same with the flat brush. Personally, I prefer to pick up a bigger round brush and use a round brush to lay flat washes, funny enough. So a round brush for flat washes. But I'll show you with a flat brush on dry paper again, so I'm making the paint nice and weak. Load my brush up well. So flat wash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush that way, and I'm going to go along like that. So again, I'm pulling the paint down the paper, pulling it down and joining up on that bottom line to try and produce a good flat wash. When you're working like this, you might see little bits that you've missed or a bit that looks slightly thicker. The worst thing you can do is go back in there and try and fix it. Excuse me. You just have to settle with what you've got. You know, watercolours, if you try and fiddle with it, it always goes much worse. So don't be tempted to go back in and fill in any white bits. Just live with them. Often with the sky, we're going to paint over the top anyway and add another layer, so we can always add to that. But if you try, as you're working, just to go underneath the line that you've made, like that, and pull the colour down, so you're not actually over painting anywhere, you will get that flatter sky wash. And again, the same technique with the wet surface. So wetting the paper first, pulling in my wash. You see how the paint just runs in the wet surface, but it is evening out a little bit. Stronger colour into the top. Wiggle that through, let it fizzle out. A little bit darker and stronger again. Well, darker and stronger means more pigment. You can even add another colour, add a little bit of brown or red to that. Feed that in, and it's just going to run and soften into the paint that we've just laid down. Again, lift out a little bit of cloud, either rinse off or drop it in the base. There's not really enough come off to do that. Rinse it out. And take out your cloud. And the more colour you have in your picture, the whiter your clouds are going to look, so do remember that. And don't be tempted to go back in and work on top of a rested surface. We don't want to do that. Now, if I was going to paint a graded sky, so say I was painting a sunset and I wanted to use different colours. Let me just find a bit of towel to wipe out my dirty palette. As usual, I'm well prepared. Not. So, to paint a graded wash, I would start at the bottom of my sky. So start with my lightest colour, put that in, and then I'd go for my second colour and lay that over the top and let that melt. Lay that over the top and let that melt. Now to get a flat graded wash, you can't really work this way. It's very difficult to get a flat variegated wash because the colours swim into each other as they meet, so you can't always get that flat surface. Let me show you what I mean, shall I? So if I want to paint a flat wash, starting at the top, using the same technique that I did before, going with my second colour. Pigments behave in different ways, and I think we looked at this quite a lot in the last term, so we understand that pigments behave in different ways. I meant to do that the wrong way round, the other way around. Never mind. See if anybody can spot my deliberate mistake and send me a message and let me know if you did. But anyway, just trying to show you how the different pigments work together when you're trying to put them on in the same method that we used for one colour. It's very difficult to get colours to sit flat into each other because they run differently into each other because they're made up of different pigments. So variegated washes, you want to be using, like I say, your sunsets and stormy skies and things. Let me just turn this over a minute so you can see. Yeah, you can see that. So variegated wet into wet. So I'm just going to wet that little bit of paper. And then I can add my colour. Casting one colour into another and then letting it go. So they're all about the same wetness here. Cast it in, and you can either zigzag through like that and create a nice kind of fizzle. Is that a good word? Fizzle? Is that in the technical term book? A little cloud there. Or you can go all the way through and mix the colours together. I'll do that in a minute. But this one, we'll leave it like that. And again, take out a little bit of cloud and drop colour in to produce some little cloud marks in there. Let's take that out there. The next demo I do for you, I will use proper paper. But there we are, that's kind of just showing you really and explaining to you how the paint works. So let's do that with stormy colours. Some greys make a stormy sky, so wet the paper. I just mix those colours that I've just been using, I'll get some nice greys. Grey base there just to put in my stormy sky colour. There we are, just throw that in. Let's look through. Mix up another grey. Let's use blue and brown this time. Make my paint slightly thicker. Just put them all through together there. Let them run in. And then slightly thicker again. And it's really good just to play around with your paints and have a bit mess about. See how things work. So again, I can just mop a couple of little stormy clouds out there. Remember, your clouds higher up the sky are going to be bigger than the ones in the bottom of the sky. So you make your clouds in the base of your sky smaller. Building up your stormy sky there. Your voice is all funny this morning. So just really, like I say, the foundation of painting skies is painting washes and letting colour run together or fizzle together if you like, or melt together, however you want to describe it. And just play around with your colours, laying them in together. If you find that you've painted the sky and it's not strong enough, you haven't put enough colour on, when it's dry, you can add some more water over the top. And then add some more paint. Slightly thicker this time because I want it stronger. It's no good putting thin paint in again, although it will make it darker, but you won't see a huge effect. So I can put that into my wet surface there, run that down and make my sky stronger. Just painting around my cloud there. It's really warm up here and this is drying so quickly, as it does when you're working in a warm environment. You can just kick back into that cloud again and just soften that edge if it gets a little hard. And the same with this here, you can just soften that in. Just use a damp brush, not too wet, just damp, otherwise you'll upset the balance of the wet paper. Then just soften that in there. I really would recommend you using a decent paper, because if you don't, you just become disheartened and you think it's not working, I can't do it, and you give up. So it's worth doing it on a decent piece of paper. Again, if I was to re-wet this, something else you just play with, because clouds are not always white, are they? Sometimes they're grey. Just put myself a little grey cloud in there. Just push that back a little bit, try and control it just a little bit. I am working very upright here as well, so that the camera can see what I'm doing. And if you work at about 45 degrees, it's steep enough. So darker, blacker clouds. Work wet into wet. When I'm softening off, I'm taking off any surplus moisture that might create too much water and add backruns. So just making that a little bit darker and a little bit more stormy looking. So there we are. So play around with your skies and oops. See what's happened there. I've just put a drip on there. Now what I don't want to do to repair a drip, if you drop the drip, is you don't want to be putting more water into it. What you need to be doing is getting a bit of tissue and being a little bit more creative with your picture. So where I've dropped that drip off my brush, I don't want to put more water into it. I want to get rid of the water to stop that drip from spreading any further. So I use a tissue. You know what watercolour's like. It's always difficult to do a repair. Just loosen that colour there a little bit by adding a little bit of water, which is what you don't really want to do, but I need to in this case, and then use my tissue to take it out. Really important if you take out anything, whether it be in skies or your picture, to take colour out. And you've put water on your paper, don't let the water sit there because it'll just push some cauliflowers and backgrounds. So there you are, I've just been a little bit creative there and created a bigger cloud formation because I wouldn't have been able to fill in the colour, so I'm better off taking it out. Okay, there's a bit of food for thought for you. I'll come back with a proper piece of paper later and do you a proper sky.